Good morning, everybody. It's June 21st, 2016. This is Steve Olson with WSO. Today I have the honor of welcoming a guest, John Moore. John Moore is a man we all need to get to know better. Vietnam veteran, Green Beret, firearms preparation expert, and the proprietor of the LibertyMan.com website. It's just a huge, valuable source for information in our community. John is among the most level-headed alternative media voices that we have in the market right now, and God knows we need more level-headedness. You can hear John Monday through Friday on Liberty News Radio, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. A link will be provided below in the comment section if you'd like to pick up his show, and he also posts those on his YouTube channel. Welcome, John, and may I start by thanking you for all of your service to our country and to your fellow countrymen.
Well, thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Good to be with you, sir.
Great. So, John, a lot of folks on my channel might not know who John Moore is. I have known your work for years, but John, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, sure. As I sometimes say, Steve, U.S. Military Intelligence School in Baltimore, Maryland, in 1967 took my 19-year-old pile of mush brain and made it something useful. They made it into a research tool where I took the intelligence analyst course, graduating as an intelligence analyst, and got off the plane in Vietnam 15 months after graduating from high school. I was a very young man, just basically 2 or 3 weeks past my 20th birthday when I arrived in Vietnam. Very young, very naive young man from the Midwest here in South Central Missouri. And as I sometimes say also, I went to Vietnam a boy and came back a man. While in Vietnam, I flew 57 combat missions as a crew member, distributing our leaflets and psychological warfare, playing our loudspeaker tapes, and of course being shot at every time that we took to the air. I did patrols basically every other night for months, going outside the wire by myself, and I conducted studies of the communists, the war, the country, the culture, attended classified briefings every morning at the 4th Corps headquarters in Canton, where I was, and then I briefed my own commander because he'd rather have coffee with his buddies rather than attend a classified briefing Monday through Friday. Left Vietnam, came back to the States, was assigned to Special Forces, where with the 6th Special Forces Group I was engaged in studying the Middle East, doing classified studies of the Middle East. Left the Army, got my degree as a paralegal, was doing that for less than a year when I was recruited to become a homicide detective for the state of Missouri. That was 43 years ago this year. So most of my adult life, I've been involved in serious matters with serious consequences, investigating murders, hundreds of other criminal matters, hundreds of civil matters, up to and including a civil lawsuit involving $100 million being at risk, where my client was being sued for $100 million, and I was brought in by Ropes and Gray, the very massive law firm out of Boston, Massachusetts, to be their one and only investigator to help them resolve that matter. Became a radio talk show host 22 years ago, started out part-time and became a full-time radio talk show host. Oh, it's been now, I've lost track, I guess about 8 or 10 years I've been a full-time radio talk show host at Republic Broadcasting. My current time slot on Republic Broadcasting is 8 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday Central Time. Do a lot of public speaking, go to preparedness expos all over the United States, from Seattle to North Carolina to Florida to Texas, and points in between, meeting people and answering their questions about preparedness. Became aware of Nibiru and that whole matter in the spring, late spring, early summer of year 2000, so I'm into the 16th, 17th year of doing that, and it's been quite a journey, and I've learned through my personal experience, Steve, that there's very predictable phases that people go to once they're exposed to this information, the things they become concerned about, the things they attempt to do, the things they become interested in, and it's a very predictable path, beginning with, for myself, for example, in the year 2000, 16 years ago, I want to see this thing for myself. So I scheduled observation time at a private observatory in South Central Missouri, thinking naively that I could go to a private observatory and look to the right place in the sky and see this thing. being in my ignorance and naivety, not knowing that wasn't possible to do from the northern hemisphere, or even from the southern hemisphere, unless you had specialized equipment that could see in the ultraviolet light spectrum. So it's been quite a journey. I continue to learn more about these matters from my private confidential sources in military intelligence, in the various government agencies I'm still connected to by private sources, and of course reading tens of thousands of pages of books. You think you can educate yourself on YouTube? Well, that could be a beginning point, Steve, but unless you're prepared to read at least 10,000 pages worth of books that really are at the Library of Congress, you're fooling yourself, Steve. You'll learn part of the truth, but not the whole truth, Steve. So that's John Moore in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I like John Moore. So I've been listening to your broadcasts for a long time, and one of the things I really enjoy is your prepper tip of the day. And what is your feeling about preparation? And how do you feel about? Do you think Americans are prepared for any kind of major destructive event right now, John?
As a whole, obviously not. Even within the Mormon community, it's about less than half of the Mormon families that take what their preparedness concept seriously. And probably 5% of adults in this country is very optimistic as far as being prepared for anything of a serious long-term nature. It's a very, very few that I would consider truly prepared, both in mindset, spiritual preparedness, skill sets, and having a place that would be considered a safe haven for the long run. It's a very, very small percentage of Americans.
And the reason I wanted to bring that out, everybody, is because, John, if you wanted to go and find more about these types of subjects, this is the kind of thing you go to John Moore for, and to the LibertyMan.com website. Just kind of a little point there as to what you're about, right? So one of the things that really interested me, though, was how you came about this Nibiru knowledge in the first place. You said you've known since 2003, I think you said. Or 2000.
The spring of 2000.
Yeah.
Well, here's what happened, Steve. Two friends of mine, independent researchers, they both approached me privately, independently, not knowing one was that the other was doing it. And they started telling me about this matter, that in our future, during our lifetimes, there's going to be this planetary-sized object come into our solar system, causing the following issues: 200-mile-an-hour winds for a better part of a day, probably a coronal mass ejection being connected to it, or a massive amount of heat hitting our planet for a better part of a day, worldwide flooding of all coastal areas, earthquakes shaking the entire planet, making it ring like a bell, and that this would all be caused, like I said, by a planetary-sized object coming into our own inner solar system. I listened to these men patiently. I thought, man, you guys really need tinfoil hats, but this is such crazy, off-the-charts, wild, weird, crazy. But I respected them enough that I went ahead and made an appointment with a friend of mine who's connected to the various lettered agencies, as we politely say, as an outside vendor. And he listened to my story, and he said, basically, John, I think you need a tinfoil hat also, but I will check it out, and I will get back with you. So about a month later, we get back and talk, and he says, John, it's exactly what you said it is. The government's known about this, verified it in 1979. That's when they began getting ready for it in 1979 in earnest. And he said, John, yes, it is real. So once I found out it was real, I began my own independent research, which continues to this day. I continue to find bits and pieces of the puzzle here and there, Steve, from open sources, private sources, confidential sources, to continue to work on this matter and then present my findings on my radio show and at my seminars that I do.
Right. And you can go to John's website to find out in the navigation bar where his seminars are for 2016 as well. So, John, one of the big things that I thought you really broke the story, in my opinion, was the stopping of the Gulf Stream in June of 2010. Can you tell us how you came about that information and what you think the cause and implications of that might have been?
Well, we know what the cause is. It's a matter of science, and here's how that all went down. In 2005, I ran across a paper paid for with your tax dollars, and all American citizens listeners who are American citizens, paid for with our tax dollars through the Department of Defense, the following paper. It's a free download at my website. It has a really catchy title, An Abrupt Climate Change Scenario and Its Implications for United States National Security. Now, two authors, they spent better part of a year or more interviewing oceanographers, economists, people in agriculture, military people, political scientists, analyzing and determining the outcome of two possible future scenarios. First possible future scenario, which had not happened yet, was the Gulf Stream slowing down severely. And the second possible future scenario was the Gulf Stream stopping completely. Now, at this point, Steve, we should tell people what the Gulf Stream is. First of all, it was given its name by Benjamin Franklin about 200 years ago. It's been well known for many centuries. The scientists call it the North Atlantic Thermohaline Conveyor. Warm water comes up out of the Caribbean and previously the Gulf of Mexico, up the east coast of Florida, past Georgia, past South Carolina, gets to the area of around Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, starts going east by northeast towards the British Isles, England, Ireland, Scotland, which it did so for more centuries than we know. Now, that warm water warmed up England, Ireland, Scotland. It split there, some going north to warm up Scandinavia, some going south to warm up the west coast of France and Europe. What I didn't know, what I found out later, was that the Gulf Stream used to, past tense, regulate the jet stream. Now, for everybody listening, no matter where you are on the planet, there's three jet streams: northern hemisphere, equatorial, and southern hemisphere. There's 200-mile-an-hour wind going on 5 miles above your head, no matter where you are, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's called the jet stream. When the paper was being written in 2004, published in 2004, I believe in the fall, the Gulf Stream had lost a alarming amount of its mass and velocity. When I found out about the paper in 2005, the scientists were saying it had lost about 1/3 of its mass and velocity. For the following reason: melting freshwater ice at Greenland, melting freshwater ice at the Antarctic, and to a far lesser extent, melting ice in the Arctic. Now, addressing that first, the majority of the ice in the Arctic is floating seawater as opposed to freshwater. There's an accumulation of snow and ice from precipitation that is in fact freshwater, but it's a tiny percentage of the overall ice at the Arctic, at the North Pole. However, all the ice at Greenland is freshwater. And if you look at the videos, which are fairly easy to find these days, you'll see the ice is melting from the bottom. Same thing at the Antarctic. It's freshwater that's melting down there.
Wait a second, John. If I might interrupt you for a second, isn't that from climate change, like Al Gore tells us about?
No, sir. That's why I specifically mentioned it's melting from the bottom.
Okay, thank you.
If it was cow flatulence and SUVs and we're using the wrong light bulbs, it would be melting from the top, and then you would see waterfalls at Greenland come to the top of the ice, not coming out of the bottom. One volcano in one day puts out more what they're calling harmful greenhouse gases than all human beings do in a full year. So that's a fantasy. That's an absolute fantasy that human beings are doing this. It's a cover story. The cover story has several reasons. First of all, to generate fabulous amounts of money, and second of all, to put people's minds at rest that it's a human-made problem that human beings can resolve. Because if human beings cause it, then human beings can mitigate, which that's a fantasy. Anyway, salt water behaves differently than fresh water, Steve. That's what allows all these currents to behave in the manner they behave. It's because warm water moves through cold water as a unit because of the way that salt water behaves. And A university level experiment has been repeated with the same results a number of times. If you take a tank 10 feet wide, 10 feet tall, 100 feet long, full of salt water, the same salinity as a normal ocean, at about 45 degrees, and you inject warm salt water at about 80 degrees at the other end, it will move as a unit all the way through that tank, that 100-foot tank, because a thermal barrier develops around that warm salt water, allowing it to do so. When you start introducing fresh water into the tank, incrementally, the thermal barrier will break down to the point where there no longer is a thermal barrier, and the warm water and the cold water mix. And that's what's happened to the Gulf Stream. Now, I have two links at my website. One link is to the brand new, every 24 hours, the U.S. Navy publishes a brand new map showing ocean surface temperatures worldwide. And that map is differentiated by colors, with dark reds and yellows being warm water, and dark blues and really dark blues and purples being cold water. And you can see that what's left of the Gulf Stream coming up the east coast of the United States, gets to about Cape Hatteras, it starts going east by northeast. It goes out a couple hundred miles, and it ends. We also have a screen capture from the United States Navy website showing the same map before June of 2010, showing the Gulf Stream going all the way across the North Atlantic, warming up England, Ireland, and Scotland, which is done for so many centuries. I was fortunate enough to be introduced to a PhD scientist in that same period of time in June, July of 2010. His name is Dr. Luigiani Zangari, an Italian PhD scientist living and working in Italy with other PhD scientists in North America and Italy, in Europe and North America. Their entire working lives are devoted to nothing but measuring the Gulf Stream. Myself and Dr. Deagle, my friend Ann Morrison, we interviewed Dr. Zangari twice, and we got the links. You can listen for yourself on my website at thelibertyman.com. You can listen to those two interviews, the last 2 Fridays of July 2010. We were able to recover those from Genesis Communications and preserve them for people to listen to. Now, Dr. Zangari doesn't speak the best English, but he speaks okay English. You can understand what the man is saying. The first interview, he says, we believe the Gulf Stream has stopped. We need to redo our calculations and report back. The last Friday of June 2010, he confirmed that the Gulf Stream did in fact stop June 12, 2010. And that's when he mentioned something I had not yet learned independently, the fact that the Gulf Stream used to regulate the jet stream. Now, the jet stream, Steve, is what causes most of our weather. It's two consequences of what causes our weather. The jet stream and energy coming at us from the sun. Now, obviously, human beings can manipulate some weather for a short period of time in a rather compact area, maybe a few hundred square miles, maybe even 1,000 square miles. But human beings cannot manipulate all weather all the time. They can't do it. They don't have that ability. So the jet stream being regulated caused us to have weather in North America that was more or less predictable for temperatures and precipitation, giving people, men and women involved in agriculture, something they could depend on for growing grains. Grains are what feed the people. Grains are what feed the animals. And it's a 5-year business cycle. One bad harvest for 4 good ones, Steve. And that dependable business cycle is broken, it's gone, not to be recovered. Which means men and women in agriculture, especially growing grains, no longer have anything dependable they can count on for weather, temperature, precipitation. It's simply gone. And it's wrecking our agricultural sector. We still produce a lot of products, obviously, clearly we do. But that dependability is gone, Steve, and it has caused turmoil in the agricultural segment of our economy. Absolute turmoil.
Yeah, let me give you a great example of that. I think in California, from the extended drought that they had, I think that threw the whole like almond and nut industry that's out in the West Coast into havoc.
It has. And in the Middle East, we hear about all the refugees streaming out by the millions at this point due to war. Well, a lot of them are, there's no doubt about that. But quite a few of them, I don't know the percentage, they're having the worst drought in 900 years in Syria and surrounding areas, which has absolutely wrecked their agricultural segment. Well, you wreck the agricultural segment in most countries, that country collapses, the economy collapses. There's a few places that have to import the majority of their food, but most places they have to have agriculture as a major, very important, not optional part of their economy. So a lot of what's going on in Syria is a consequence of the worst drought in 900 years, Steve. And what's going on in the American Southwest, if you look at a current map, there's every 24 hours a new map of what's going on with the jet stream. You'll see the jet stream is doing a loop-to-loop clockwise in the American Southwest. Instead of the prevailing jet stream coming in from the west off the Pacific Ocean, the American Southwest is doing a loop-to-loop where it just builds on itself, losing all its cool temperatures and losing all its moisture, which is why we're having these unprecedented temperatures and unprecedented lack of rain in the American Southwest. And it's just going to get worse unless that jet stream does something different and starts bringing in cooler temperatures and moisture off the Pacific Ocean, Steve.
Well, one of the things that we've noted in our research is that the Pacific Ocean seems to be rising in temperature at a dramatic rate right now.
That's very scary because it's the largest body of water on the planet. It constitutes half the planet, basically, and it's also in the process of dying due to radiation from Fukushima. It's very scary. But let me bring up another thing that's equally as scary, Steve, and that would be bugs. Now, most people don't like bugs. We find them to be a nuisance and so forth on one hand. On the other, they're an essential, non-optional part of the world we live in. It's a pretty simple equation. No bugs, no people. The world we live in cannot exist without bugs. So my first story goes back Labor Day 6 years ago. I'm traveling east to west in New York State at night on the interstate highway, 70 miles an hour. I stopped to get gas at 10 o'clock at night, a warm summer night in New York State. There's about 6 bugs on the windshield. I look up at the bright white lights at the service station. I could count the bugs, there's so few of them. And that was my trip across New York State 6 years ago. Last summer 2015, I'm in central Florida, going from the south to the north, on the interstate highway, 70 miles an hour, 10 o'clock at night. I stopped to get gas. There's about 6 bugs on the front of the car, and the same thing, I could count the bugs around the bright white lights at the service station. So a few months ago, I'm talking to a woman I know who is very heavily involved in preparedness. She's an official at the county level and knows many people connected to FEMA and so forth and in the military. And I said, what's the deal? What's going on? She says, here's the deal, John. Within 100 miles of the Atlantic Ocean, within 100 miles of the Pacific Ocean, and the Gulf of Mexico, there's almost no bugs in the United States of America. They're almost all gone. They've retreated to the interior of the country where I am. Now, I find that very disturbing and very alarming, Steve, and I'm not aware of any, either mainstream or alternative media, attention to this matter. But it's very alarming and very disturbing because of the simple equation I just gave. No bugs, no people. We cannot live. The world we exist in, the world that supports us in agriculture, cannot exist without bugs, Steve. It simply cannot.
Absolutely right. And we've seen this long-term phenomenon with the honeybee population, and which I'm very intimate with only from the sense that I live next to a honey production area, so there's a lot of people that make honey here. And without exception, any of the honey producers in my area, they're saying that they're losing, for every 4 colonies that they establish, they lose 3 of them.
Right. Well, the bees that are left are in the Midwest.
Right, we're holding it down right now. Right, exactly right.
Right. East Coast, West Coast, Gulf Coast, which there's, especially in California, a lot of agricultural activity, and the bees are simply dying out, and that's no secret.
Mm-hmm.
But what is a secret and not being talked about is all the bugs are dying out, not just the bees. Now, the bees have made mainstream news for a number of reasons, but the fact, and it is a provable fact, that all the bugs are dying out is not being discussed in either mainstream or alternative media, either one. It is just too scary, absolutely too scary, because the consequences of that, once you come to understand the consequences, if you're not scared, I'd have to be wondering if you got a IQ above room temperature.
Yeah, sorry about my guard dog. He is a paranoid dog. I don't have a professional radio studio, as you might imagine, but so I do apologize for that background noise, John.
No, it's not an issue. We've had interesting background noises in a lot of my shows.
Amen. Well, I have a German Shepherd with me from Germany, speaks German. He was a police dog, but I was lucky enough to get him, and he guards me 24/7.
Well, my prepper tip of the day had that I was advocating people get a dog, and dogs are a marvel. I never had dogs most of my adult life. I was a city dweller. I didn't feel it was fair to a dog to have it in a city environment. But moving to the country, I've had a number of dogs, and you really get attached to their personality. They each have their own unique personality, and they have hearing and smell senses that are far in excess of any normal human being.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I like the idea that, and you can tell he's a very good German Shepherd breed because he'll bark like this during the day. I think that's probably my wife coming home, but at nighttime, he will never bark unless there's really a threat. It's very strange. It's very strange. Yeah, it's very strange. It has to be a real threat, otherwise he won't wake us up. So, interesting stuff. So back to this though. I've got a map of the Earth jet stream right now, real time, up just as we're talking to John. So, do you think that the bugs, the Gulf Stream, the desalinated water mixing with the salinated water, all of those things are attributable to this solar system phenomenon, John?
I don't have evidence of that. And I with my training and professional life that I've lived, I live in the world of evidence, Steve.
Mm-hmm.
And until I have scientific evidence that is verifiable, I'm not going to speculate on why. I know that it is. That's enough for me.
Yeah, right. Right.
If I'm on a railroad track and the train is running out of control towards me, I don't need to know why. I just need to know to get off the darn track.
Well, that's something that I get loud and clear from listening to you, is regardless of the potential emergency that could happen, regardless of the type of chaotic situation, be it war, pestilence, or otherwise, John Moore is the guy that says, be prepared now for anything, right?
Well, yes, absolutely. And the morning of September 11th, 2001, my adult daughter and her then 3-year-old son were living with myself and my wife in Metro St. Louis. And prior to that morning, she never thought about her dear old dad's preparedness, which she'd been exposed to her entire life, maybe thinking it was silly or not paying attention. But by noon that morning, we had all the money out of the bank, all 3 vehicles fueled up, ready to go, and loaded, and I had the family alert. One more incident anywhere in this country, and we take off for our safe haven. I don't care what it is or where it is. And for the next week, we monitored all the emergency frequencies, and we set up a communication center on the dining room table with my various radios, and monitored 24/7. My wife at the time was a bit of an insomniac, so she covered the night shift, and we monitored the frequencies for the next week. And she became a believer watching what happened then and being concerned about her 3-year-old son. And she's paid attention ever since to what her father says. And I take things very seriously. I've been in combat. I lived through the Tet Offensive in 1968. I've been in airplanes shot by enemy gunfire more times than I care to think about. In fact, it was 10 years before I could fly on a plane when I got back without getting physically sick, because my brain was telling my body, oh my God, John's going to get another one of these crazy planes and somebody's going to try to kill us. It took me 10 years to get past it. Now I can fly and not get sick. So yes, I do. I'm a pretty calm guy when it comes to any given emergency. I do what needs to be done in a calm and direct and deliberate manner to overcome whatever the crisis might be, whether it's a burglar or a drunk or a hurricane, which we had here, a hurricane right here in my backyard 6 years ago, of all things, which, according to mainstream science, that can't happen. But we had a hurricane over land, moved across Oklahoma, Missouri, and into Illinois 6 years ago.
I
So it's
remember that. Yes, indeed, I do remember that because I live in I almost live next to Illinois, John. If you kind of picture the bottom part of Wisconsin, in that lower west southwest corner of Wisconsin that I talked
sure,
about,
sure.
we're hopeful that we're high enough. We talked about that before. So, John, what would you say? A lot of the folks that listen to my channel and that are going to be listening to this, are preppers. They have been preparing, and they do have a good, plan and those kinds of things. But a good percentage, I'd say 50% of the people that email me or communicate with me, are people that live in a city or that are maybe not that financially well off, where they can go buy Food for Liberty 28-day packs, things like that. What do you say to a person that's in that kind of a less than ideal financial situation but still wants to be ready?
Well, first of all, we have a foundation to build on, and the first and most important thing above anything and everything else is your spiritual preparation. I do private consultations. I bill $250 an hour for private consultations. I've worked with very wealthy men and women. I mean, men and women who could write checks into 6 digits, liquid wealth. One man in particular, he could literally buy trailer loads full of anything that you can imagine. But because he did not have a spiritual foundation, he never had any source of satisfaction, any source of being ready and prepared and peace of mind. He never had peace of mind because he did not have a spiritual preparedness. So that's absolutely essential. And whatever that is, you need to do it for yourself. After that comes skills. Whether you have a group of 6 or a group of 600, 2 skills in greatest demand and short supply are the following 2 skills. And you can get these for little or no money. First aid skills and ham radio skills. First aid CPR and ham radio skills. You can get first aid CPR training at your local hospital, fire department, junior college, Red Cross, lots of places to get first aid and CPR training at little or no cost. Typically a small, very small charge for materials, if that. And the same thing with ham radio. There's ham radio clubs all over the United States. You can typically people in the ham club will loan you a book for study or audio tapes for study. You study and you get your license. And also within the ham radio culture, good quality used equipment can be purchased at very reasonable dollar amounts. Other skills people would want to have would be skills of gardening. Once again, gardening, it can be done in a 5-gallon bucket on the balcony of a city apartment, just to learn those skills and grow a few nice tasty tomatoes, for example. Seed packets don't cost much. Dirt doesn't cost much. There's ways to get started and ways to acquire equipment and supplies at very reasonable prices. I'm not ashamed to go into a charity gift store, charity resale shop and see what they've got there, or go and look at Craigslist or eBay, or go to auctions or flea markets or yard sales to get the things that I might need. So don't, just because you don't have deep pockets financially doesn't mean you can't get the skills you need, doesn't mean you can get supplies and tools and equipment you need at very reasonable prices if you're diligent and go to the thrift stores and go to the yard sales and so forth. So don't give up just because you don't have deep pockets financially. Now, the best way to store the most food at the least expense is bulk grains. Beans and rice, for example, has very complete nutrition, except for the lack of vitamin C. Uh, bulk grains bought from your local feed store, 50-pound bags. You're looking at less than 20 bucks for almost any of them, typically between 10 and 12 and $20 per 50 pounds. Of course, they need to be stored properly so that the bugs and larvae won't hatch out and eat up the grain, but that can be done also very reasonably. Uh, there's lots of ways to skin this cat at a reasonable expense. If you have the skills of ham radio, first aid CPR, you might find a group of people that's getting prepared that wants you to be part of their group because you're certified in CPR and first aid, that you are a licensed ham operator. That makes you a valuable addition to any group, a private group, a family group, a church group, a community group, and they're out there. There's hundreds of groups like that out there that would be more than happy to have another member who has these valuable skills. So,
In
lots
fact,
of ways to
that's
skin that cat, Steve.
Yep. Sorry to interrupt you, John. But yeah, we actually at WSO, we took the step based on subscriber feedback because so many people were in that kind of strait where I was getting the feedback they were alone, they didn't know anybody else that cared about these issues, and they were everywhere. It was almost like they were alone. They felt alone, but only two doors down was another person that had the same concerns. Is what I was finding.
Right.
So what
Well,
we did was we put
yeah,
these little groups together, and that's one place where people could start if they wanted to. You do, by no means, this is not any kind of an obligation or commitment or anything like that. This is just a place where folks can come and get to know each other and start to learn prep skills together. That's what we're intending.
absolutely. Another thing to help your people, your listeners, uh, I know you listen to a lot of radio talk show hosts, Steve. Do you know any other radio talk show hosts other than John Moore offering to send a check to their listeners?
No, I've never heard of that.
Well, you're hearing it now. John Moore is offering to send a check to his listeners. If you go to my website, thelibertyman.com, right at the top of my homepage, you'll see Uncle Sam pointing right at you. And you click on there, you'll find the information you need to get John Moore personally to send you a check by either making a referral for a speaking engagement or booking a speaking engagement.
Oops.
And yes, in fact, I will send a check to the person who accomplishes that on my behalf. And it's going to be a good-sized check. We're talking hundreds of dollars here, Steve. So yes, to my knowledge, I am the only radio talk show host. Alex Jones doesn't do it. These other guys don't do it, but I do it. I offer to send you a check if you want to help me achieve my goals. And it's real simple and real straightforward, Steve.
Well, before we get off that though, John, why don't you talk about maybe there's some people out there listening that would want to hire you, and then you can give me a big commission. I'm just kidding, but I would do that to you. But if there's, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the topics that you're speaking on, and that people could maybe hire you for.
Well, we're approaching all different audiences with all different needs, and I customize my presentation for that audience. We're not approaching the Fortune 100 companies because the majority of them have already relocated to Denver and other high altitude places. In fact, the Federal Reserve announced a couple of years ago they're moving from New York to Chicago. But the rest of the Fortune 1000, we'll be talking to them as potential clients, churches, private groups, community groups, to address their specific concerns. Obviously, if you're within 50 to 100 miles of the Atlantic Ocean, Pacific Ocean, or Gulf of Mexico, you really, really need to hear my message because those areas will all be underwater. And that's scientifically provable fact, in my opinion. If on my DVD where I interview one of the only Navy veteran I found who's willing to go public because he has 100% disability from being injured in the Navy. The rest of these guys all have pensions. They're not about to risk their pension by going public with what they know from classified briefings. That's not going to happen. So we approach these different audiences and customize our message to the needs of each audience, Steve.
Okay, great. Well, and you can learn more about that at www.thelibertyman.com. And John, I so much appreciate just getting this first introductory meeting in with you, but I want to have you back many times if you are willing to do so.
Well, I am more than willing to do so to get the word out. I've seen firsthand the consequences of not being prepared when I lived through the Tet Offensive, innocent men and women being injured and killed, having their homes burned to the ground, and living out in a field until they could find, literally living in a field in a city park while the authorities try to find some place where their families got in contact with them. The consequences are not, for most people, war, for most Americans, war is an hour and a half in an air-conditioned room with a bag of popcorn. For me, war is the smells, the sights, the sounds of human misery. And it's something that once you've been through a war, it will change you forever. And it certainly did me.
But you've maintained and kept a level head, and you've been a service to your, to your country and to your fellow countrymen. We thank you. John can be heard Monday through Friday, and I always get so there's a couple different names for it. So I say Liberty News Radio, is that correct?
We don't. I don't know if they're up to speed with my new time slot, and you can't listen live there.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Why don't you tell us where we can listen to you, John? So
well, the easy way, once again, go to my website, thelibertyman.com, and there's a listen live link there, and I have two different archives, one on YouTube and the other Republic Broadcast Archives, and typically one or the other will work. There's always issues because we're dealing with computers and computer maintenance, but typically one or the other will always work.
And then if you missed John's show, you can catch him on his YouTube channel as well. John, thank you for spending time with us today, and we can't wait to hear from you again.
Thank you, Steve. Look forward to it.